That's when my eyes really started to open, and I started to really see who was running the country. And when Trump said there was a deep state, there was a big. So whenever there's a huge pushback like that, that's when you. And then of course I got caught up in the.
This is Zergadowski here of WeAreChange.org in an alleyway right by 6th Street, joined by the one and only Jimmy Dore. Strange location, sure, but we just got off stage at the Minds Festival where we did a panel on conspiracy theories. It was a great conversation. And Jimmy, you didn't always kind of believe in conspiracy theories. There was a kind of larger transition, and I would say what you've kind of become is, I think, one of the most genuine voices out there in alternative media. The way that you process information pisses off a lot of people on the left and a lot of people on the right. We've been doing that for a couple of years, but I think it would be important to kind of get your perspective, because it definitely does seem, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was this shift, there was this kind of transition that happened within you that I think is absolutely fascinating, that I wish other people would learn from. What was, would you say, a kind of galvanizing moment for you that changed a lot of your kind of critical thinking?
Well, I think it was Russiagate, and I saw that that was a complete hoax that was perpetrated by not only the Democratic Party, the Hillary Clinton campaign, but the FBI and the CIA. And then it was also, again, the media. You see that it's owned by the... So the CIA doesn't... When I realized the CIA doesn't work for the president, because Chuck Schumer gave that game away right on Rachel Maddow when he said that the president, Donald Trump, shouldn't go against the intelligence community, because if you do, they've got 6 ways to Sunday to with you. How you doing? And so that's when I'm like, oh, that's when my eyes really started to open, and I started to really see who was running the country. And when Trump said there was a deep state, there was a big. So whenever there's a huge pushback like that, that's when you. And then of course I got caught up in the Seth Rich thing, right? All I did was do what any normal reporter would do, was I asked obvious questions. And I got a smear piece written about me in the Washington Post. And then I was like, oh, okay. So whenever they overreact like that, you know there's something to it, right? And so that's why now we know it took 65 years. They're not going to release the Seth Rich computer for 65 years. Wow. Okay. So, and again, so that's when I realized, you don't get in trouble for lying, you get in trouble for telling the truth. That's why Julian Assange is rotting in a Belmarsh prison, not for lying, but for telling the truth. And if you lie, you get rewarded with a $35 million contract like Rachel Maddow. You tell the truth, they'll fire you, like they did. Why do you think they fired Ed Schultz? Why do you think they fired Tucker Carlson? It wasn't because he was lying. It's because they took away his advertisers, and then he was able to tell the truth. And once he started telling the truth about the war, the military-industrial complex, Syria, he told the truth about. And when he brought on RFK Jr. to tell the truth about, that was the final straw. They had to get rid of him. So to me, the big thing was it was Seth Rich, it was Russiagate, and then Syria. I was on the forefront, not to pat myself on the back too hard, but I was the first one out there debunking the Syrian gas attacks, at least in the United States. And then Aaron Mate came along and did meticulous work on that, debunking the OPCW and seeing how they're captured. So there's I slowly realized if they can pull off a hoax like Russiagate, which most of the people in the country still believe in, what else? And it just made me I started to question. Now I realize that whether you believe that carbon is the reason for there's a car coming.
That's okay. We can move in here. We can keep the conversation going. Keep it just further out. Yeah.
Whether you think that carbon it causes change or not, it doesn't matter, because the solutions that the billionaire class are trying to institute have nothing to do with. If they, when they tell you that we have to fight carbon emissions, but they don't say anything about the Nord Stream pipeline being blown up, the biggest methane emission in the history. They don't say anything about 3 new military bases being 2 of them in Syria, 3 of them in the Philippines just in the last year. And we all know the number 1 emitter of carbon in the world is the U.S. military. Greta Thunberg's never going to protest outside of a military place. So what do they go after? They go after Dutch farmers and leaf blowers in California. They don't go after private jets. They don't go after the military. 1,000 military. But as soon as John Kerry and Bill Gates said we have to get rid of a couple hundred military bases and ban private jets, that's when I know they're serious about it. But they're not. So they're using that to control us, right? And so it's just one thing after another. And again was one of the biggest wake-up. I bought the propaganda at first, and then I got injured. And as soon as I looked into it, it turned out they were lying about everything.
Exactly.
They were lying about funding where the virus came from. They were lying about funding the virus. They said if you came from the lab, you were a white supremacist. They lied about contraction. They lied about transmission. They lied about herd immunity. They lied about natural immunity. They lied about masks. There wasn't a thing they didn't lie about, and people still believe those lies, and they still call you a conspiracy theorist or a anti for asking obvious questions, or even just if you reveal a lie, they get mad at you.
Yeah.
Just
I want to talk about so much because there's so many tangents that you just went off on, especially the Russian collusion one, which I think was the overall theme here. Because I remember reporting on that and being like, so these are the intelligence agencies telling us to believe them again. I was like,
yes.
Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? There's proof of them lying to us routinely, but they're telling us to believe them based on no evidence, no documentation at all. And all I clearly said was, can we please see the documentation? The Washington Post literally came out and wrote hit pieces against us, calling me specifically a Russian agent, a part of Russian collusion. I'm like, I'm Polish. The Polish people don't like the Russian people. I was born and raised there, and you're going to label me, slander me, Russian collusion, and you're going to put me on this list? And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? But a lot of people on the left wanted to believe it because it made Donald Trump look bad. And I think that was the initial transition, because a lot of people saw Trump as this kind of ultimate boogeyman, this ultimate person that they needed to take down, and they were willing to compromise their morals in order to do it. You didn't. What was that like? Because I know there was probably a lot of pressure. It was a lot of fear. There was a lot of people also being like, Jimmy, you were on our side. Why aren't you with our gang affiliation anymore?
Yeah, well, I worked at the Young Turks, right, which is they claim to be the largest online news show in the world. And when Trump became elected, and even before that, they just started repeating CIA and FBI talking points uncritically. And we're supposed to be there to debunk those things. And so I did. And they hated me. And it got to the point where when I would walk into the newsroom, the people who were on my show at the Young Turks was called the Aggressive Progressives. And when we would walk into the newsroom, they would turn their backs on us. And that's real. It felt like being like I was Serpico at the Young Turks. And then I knew when the Mueller report came out that it would prove there was no evidence of Donald Trump working with the Russians to overthrow the election. And that was proven. Mueller said there's absolutely no evidence of that. And I thought we'd all go back to normal, fighting the establishment again, and that's not what happened. The Young Turks just jumped on another horse and started saying, no, they didn't look in the right places. Mueller didn't look in the right places. And I was like, well, I got to get out of here. So I left. So it was very uncomfortable, and a lot of my Hollywood friends now treat me like a pariah, like I'm a Trumper or something, because I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton, and I wouldn't endorse corruption inside the Democratic Party. I voted third party for the last two elections, presidential, and then I wouldn't go along with this Russiagate, and then I wouldn't go along with the narrative. So people look at me like, because they're propagandized, and that's the thing. Americans don't realize we're the most propagandized people in the entire world.
Absolutely. You mentioned a couple media personalities like Donahue, and I remember covering the Donahue story. It was very similar to what happened to Jesse Ventura. Yeah. It was also sort of similar what happened to Cenk. There was also Tucker. There was also so many other individuals that kind of came out, risked their jobs, and said, hey, no, we need to talk about this war. We need to talk about this conflict. Jesse Ventura being the biggest one, they kind of put him in golden handcuffs.
That's right.
When it comes to the media personalities that you worked with and were in the business with, is there anyone that you look up to as someone who you think is an inspiration or doing a good job? And is there someone that you absolutely detest and really don't like? Who's your favorite and who's your least favorite person in the history of kind of modern media?
Well, Glenn Greenwald, I think, is amazing, and he's an inspiration. And he's I think besides Julian Assange, he's the best journalist of our generation by far. Yeah. And I don't. It's not. All the corporate news journalists, from Anderson Cooper to Sean Hannity to Rachel Maddow, she's probably the worst of all of them. But my biggest disappointment was Cenk Uygur. I still have affection for him. I learned a lot from him, and I think he betrayed himself. and his own audience when he started repeating CIA talk. He got Trump derangement syndrome, and it just wrecked him, and it wrecked his show, it wrecked his mission. He's pro-war. They were for the Syrian war. They're for the Ukraine war. He finally found a war he didn't like in Gaza. They were for a Libyan war, and so he finally found one in Gaza he doesn't like. So that's good. So again, it's just a disappointment, and I really don't have animosity towards him. I have it's this great sense of loss. I felt like I had a family at the Young Turks, and we were all on the same mission, and we're not. It turned out we were not. I think the best would be, I would say, I like Matt Taibbi, Aaron Mate, got Max Blumenthal at the Gray Zone. They do amazing work. There's only a handful of people, so it's not hard.
Yeah, and they all get attacked. They all get called Russian agents. They all get censored and demonetized and downranked in the algorithms. And I really do believe there's something really sinister happening, especially with a lot of up-and-coming journalists that are kind of kneecapped by the censorship, because it's harder and harder to have these kind of discussions, especially with what I believe to be kind of intel agents' control of social media and their larger influence on the algorithms and their larger influence between who gets a voice, how much is not. How do you navigate this kind of landscape? Because I've been utilizing Twitter, I've been utilizing my email list, I've been trying to make my voice as loud as it could be, but there's so many difficulties. How do you face those difficulties, and what would be your words of advice for someone trying journalism or trying to be in this media sphere?
It's tough. I would say start a channel right away. Twitter by no means is perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was under Dorsey. So you got Twitter, you got YouTube isn't going to let you cover anything controversial in the way it needs to be covered unless you are. I've been pretty adept at being able to play the game at YouTube. They did come after me over, and they took down videos and gave me a strike, because I said that didn't stop transmission or contraction, and I was the first one on YouTube to say that, and I was right. And now everybody agrees. And now not only do they agree, doesn't stop transmission or contraction, they all deny that they ever said it did.
Yeah.
And that's what I got censored for on YouTube. So because I had figured out that the countries that had the biggest uptake of the were also having the biggest outbreaks of the virus, and I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. And then I had Dr. Robert Malone on my show, and he explained to me what a leaky is, and so I figured that out and put it together, and I got in trouble for that. And again, a lot of I would say most of my old friends in comedy in Hollywood completely turned on me and abandoned me. When they see me in a comedy club, they go the other way. I don't get invited to those parties anymore, but I have new friends, and I have a new world now, and it's a lot more rewarding.
Yeah.
And those people, I guess, were never my friends.
Yeah. No, you definitely do find out who is your friend and not during tough times.
Yeah.
We're in some very tough times, and I think we're going to be heading into some more tough times as well. One of the things that kind of spoke to me with what you said on stage, it kind of resonates with my mission and what I've been kind of doing personally myself, was that you said life is short. Why cater? Why bow down to all these kind of fear mongers? You didn't see it that way. You said it more articulate when Alex Stein brought up how essentially Donald Trump was made afraid by the deep state and he had to comply with them or they're going to take his life. You said, no, life is worth living in its fullest by challenging and standing up to these people. What gave you this kind of understanding? And for our audience, could you explain it just as eloquently as you did on stage?
No, well, I used to consider myself a Sam Harris atheist. And because I was brought up Catholic, and I had a rebellion against religion, and then recently in the last 4 or 5 years, I've been on a Carl Jungian journey into inward, and that's where God is inward. It's not external, and I've had many experiences of the divine and the transcendental, and so now I do know that there's much more out there than this, and that that there is no opposite of life. Life doesn't end. Death is the opposite of birth. It's not the opposite of life. So this goes on forever, and this is just one degree of consciousness. And by the way, it's the most boring degree of consciousness. Yeah. So hang on, these guys want to come through.
Yeah, I think they're fine. But no, what you describe, it resonates with me so much because there's so much greater truth to this. Once you kind of put your life on a purpose to get the greater truth out there and to help as many people as you can, everything just starts to align in some kind of magical way, and you're able to work something bigger than just yourself or your ego or just even the amount of views you get. And once you kind of go on that mission, everything kind of aligns it in a very kind of synchronistic way where you kind of realize you're on the right path.
Yes, synchronicities. That's a big thing. That's a big part of what Carl Jung talks about, and I notice them all the time, and in my life. And it is, you have these, as Joseph Campbell talked about, these tiny thousand hands you feel pushing you along the way. Once where doors were closed, they then open, and not that it's not scary, not that to speak to go against the establishment and to have people turn their back on you and say the most horrible things about you. People who I've known all my life say the most horrible things about me on social media. That's not fun. But anybody doing anything, there's venues that won't have me now, like theaters that I've sold out for years and stopped letting me play their theater. So, but I just came back from Europe, right? I did a tour of us. I was in Stockholm, Sweden, Copenhagen, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Berlin, Oslo, and London, and the people there are just as hungry for the truth and just as sick of their media and their governments as the people in the United States are. So I think there's a global awakening happening, and that's what we need to have happening. We need to, that's what I figured out, identity politics, why it's pushed. It doesn't come from the bottom up. It comes from the top down, just like all the trans issues, just like all the identity politics, all comes from the top down, comes from Vanguard and BlackRock, because that's a way to keep us divided and hated each other. And because if we come together along class lines, that's the only thing that scares the establishment. And that's what I've been trying to, they want you to think your neighbor is the who's your enemy. And a lot of people think that. Your neighbor is not your enemy. Your neighbor is being oppressed by the same oligarchy and handful of billionaires that run everything as you are. They're that, just like I say that, they did a controlled demolition of our economy during. It smashed everybody, and they want me to hate my neighbor for the pain I'm feeling because my neighbor wouldn't take a didn't work the way they said it did in the first place. Yeah. The thing that scares them is us coming together in venues like this, meeting each other face to face, realizing that we're not the cartoon characters that the media portrays us to be, and that we all want the same things. We just have a little bit different ways of getting there. We all want to end the wars, invest the money back here, have a living wage, and healthcare that doesn't bankrupt us.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I'm checking the time because I know you got to go on stage in about 9 minutes. Okay. Where can people find you? Where can people support you? And then anything else regarding your kind of, just really quick, one last question. I'm checking the time. I did talk to the organizer. I know when you got to go on stage. Okay. But just one last question. When it comes to the... I know you were injured by it. Yeah. How's your health right now? Any kind of learning lessons from that incident that you might want to share with other people who are also injured, and what the resources, what they should do?
Whenever they don't want you to question something, that's the thing you should question. Science, the people on the left turn it into a religion that you can't question. That's not what's if you can't question it, it's not science. Just remember that. Yeah. So whenever they don't want you to question something, question it. That's when it's most vital to question. So that would be the one thing that I would that I learned from that.
But the people who are injured, what are you doing in response to that?
I'm being treated by Dr. Pierre Corey, and he's got me on a regimen of certain drugs to detoxify me and get the spike protein out of me. And the sad truth is we won't know what the real effects of this are for about at least 8 more years. Yeah. So that's why it takes 10 years to prove. You have to wait and see if it's going to kill you or if it makes things worse, which has happened with lots of. Exactly. So. And this is going to be no different. So we won't really know for, I just had my fingers crossed that, my heart's okay. I know I had nerve damage. I had brain fog. I had all that, so that's all inflammation. And so now I'm just kidding. Seed oils are bad. Now I realize
good.
I'm not eating seed oils or French fries anymore unless they're cooked in tallow, and I'm only eating avocado oil or extra virgin olive oil, and I'm eating butter. So anyway, those are some of the things I'm doing. But Dr. Pierre Corey, he's on the frontline doctors, and he has a protocol to help people. So
awesome. You're on stage in 10 minutes. Okay. We can walk back there. As we walk back there, where can people find you and support?
JimmyDore.com, DORE, JimmyDore.com.
Jimmy, break a leg in there. Thank you so much for your time. Pleasure. Really, really appreciate you. Okay. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing. And thank you guys for watching here in this alleyway, which we randomly are doing outside of 6th Street. As we're going to ask you to subscribe, we're going to ask you to check out LukeUnfiltered.com, as we are also going to be doing a nature hike. I don't know if this video is going to be out when we're doing this nature hike, but we're doing a nature hike with Alex coming up soon here in this very modernized, leftist, liberal, bastion, Austin, Texas, in its fullest, beautiful glory, as you can see here. The smell was a little bit harsh to deal with here, but this is Austin, Texas. Occupied territory reporting here from the front lines. This is Luke Radowski here of wearechange.org.